Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make a shooting system in Unreal. As you can see here, it plays the animation, the sound, and you can see that the bullet is going where we're aiming at. So this is a pretty cool system, and it will be useful for any FPS game you're making. So let's make it. For this tutorial, we'll be using the third person template, which we'll now repurpose for first person in a moment. So let's go over to the third person, and we're going to find blueprints, and we want to open the third person character blueprint. Over here, the first thing to do is to make the movement first person. So we want to select the character, and we want to go up here and we're going to search rotation. Over here, we want to enable use controller desired rotation and disable orient rotation to move. Once this has been done, we'll go over here to the top left over by the viewport, and we're going to get rid of our character and make our camera first person. Let's begin by the camera. Select the camera boom component over to the left, and we want to disable the search. We'll go over to the camera section, and the target arm length will be 0. We'll then move the boom up to about the height of the head. Then select the mesh, and we're going to reset the skeletal mesh asset and the animation class asset. You may now go ahead and compile. I recommend to enable save and compile always, so that it saves your blueprint automatically. Then let's go ahead and hit play on a new window. You can now see that we have a first person controller. The next step is to go ahead and create our input. For this, we'll go over to the third person folder and we'll go over to input actions, and we're gonna right click. We're gonna go over to the input section, create a new input action. This one I'm gonna name IA_attack primary hold. Go ahead and duplicate it over, and instead of hold, name it tab. Select them both and save them. We don't need to configure those inputs. For this, we're gonna go over to the input folder and open IMC_default. We'll go ahead and add a new mapping, and for this, we'll first select hold. Click here and then press any button or key, and it will automatically detect it. Then go ahead and add a trigger. First we'll do down, and then we'll do released. Go ahead and add another mapping, and over here we're going to select the tab. We'll go ahead and do the same thing, same button, but this time instead of down and released, we'll just do pressed. Save the asset, and let's go over to the third person character. Inside here, we'll right click and do IA, well, basically do the name of what the input you did. Do it for both of them. Make sure you're selecting enhanced action events. Now that we have this, the next step is to go ahead and we're going to add two booleans. One's going to be named shoot auto imp, and the other boolean is going to be named shoot semi imp. Then we'll first set the shoot auto input when it's triggered, and we're going to set it by the action value. Basically, this input, we set it so it triggers while the input is being pressed and when it releases, so we know which value it is. And for the tab, we want to make it same thing, but in this case we're not applying the value through the input. We're going to be setting it manually over here to true. Then we'll do a delay until next tick, which will give us enough time to detect it, and then we'll set it over to false. Don't forget to compile. Back in the editor, we'll go ahead and create a new folder, which I will call game. Then we're going to create a blueprints folder, and inside that a weapons folder. Inside here, right click and go over to blueprint class, and we're going to create a blueprint of type actor. This I will name BP_FireArm. Once in our blueprint, we'll go ahead and create the variables first. We'll begin by creating two float variables. The first one's going to be named fire rate, and the second one will be called range. Then we'll create a vector2 for recoil. In Unreal, this is named vector2D. Find the one that says only vector2D. We'll then add two booleans. The first one will be named isAutomatic, which defines whether or not we can shoot automatic. The second one will be whether or not we can shoot. This will be used for the fire rate. Add one more variable, and this one is going to be of type BP third person. So just find BP third person character, which is our player blueprint, and I'm just going to rename it to player. Before we can make the code, we need to add two more variables, and this will be the last ones. The first one's going to be called a shoot montage, and for the type we're going to do it anim montage. And the second variable we're going to call shoot sound, and for the type we're going to do sound base. Now let's go ahead and create two functions. The first one's going to be called a shoot. For this function, we want to output or return a type of boolean, and we're going to call this could shoot. Then for the second function, we're going to call it get recoil, and for the type of the function we want it to be pure. Basically, this is not executed, it's just a getter function. And for it, on the outputs, we want to add a vector2 called recoil. Let's begin by coding this function. The first thing we want to do is go ahead and drag over the recoil vector2 that we created earlier. Right click on here and split the struct pane so we can access the values individually. And for the X, we are going to basically randomize it between negative X and positive X, so left and right. So go ahead and do negate float, and we need to execute this, so let's just do that. Then we're going to drag this off and we're going to do random float in range. For the maximum, we'll just pass the raw X. Then this can be passed straight into the recoil, but before that, we also need to split the struct bin. For the Y, what we want to do is we don't want to do positive and negative. For the random, we want to do the 25% of it. So for this, we're going to multiply and we're going to do 0.25. This will basically make it so that the minimum that our camera moves is 25% of the Y up. Now let's random range. And for the maximum, we'll just pass the raw Y. Then we want to negate this value because remember that when it comes to Y, it is different. In this case, if we do positive, we're going to look down instead of up. Go ahead and connect everything. Let's go ahead and go over to the shoot function and code this. First of all, disconnect the return node and just put it up here for the meantime. Then we're going to drag it off and we're going to do a branch. And for this, we're going to do can shoot. Then if we cannot shoot, we want to return false. Else, we want to go ahead and do a line trace, which in Unity terms is a raycast. For the start of it, we want it to be our camera position. So for this, we're going to grab a reference to our player, then grab a reference to the follow camera. And from here, we want to get the world location. And this is going to be the start of the trace. For the ending of the trace, what we want to do is add it. Then over here, we're going to add it, but in this case, we're going to add the forward vector. So we're going to drag it off from follow camera and do get forward vector. And for this forward vector, we'll then multiply it by the range. Then we drag this over to end. Now, I'm going to do something here that I wouldn't recommend, but this is just for my peace of mind. So Unreal's measurement is in millimeters. The range is going to be millimeters. So for example, 150 meters is going to be 150,000 millimeters. So I'm just going to multiply this by 1,000, just so we can get that out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and do that. This way we don't have to have huge numbers on it. Now, after the line trace, what we want to go ahead and do is we want to actually play our effects. So we'll drag it off from here and we'll go ahead and do montage play. Now, if you cannot see it, just make sure that you have disabled context sensitive. And then for the montage play, this will basically play an animation. What we're going to do is, where we want to play it is the skeletal mesh, which we have not added. So go over here to the top left on components and do skeletal mesh. Once you've added it, grab a reference to it, and we'll then do get anim instance. This will be your target. Then for the montage, we want to get the shoot montage, which we already have a variable for. And after we've done this, we want to apply the recoil. So go over here and grab a reference to your player. And we're going to do first add controller jaw input. Then we want to do add controller, but in this case, pitch input. Now for the values, we're going to use our get recoil function, which will also split the struct and will pass the X for the jaw and the Y for the pitch. Then we want to add a return node. To the return, do add return node and make sure to have enabled context sensitive. And for the value, we'll pass true. Go ahead and compile. Next, go over to your event graph, double click on it to open it up, and we'll begin by assigning our player variable. So we want to do right click and get player pawn. This will return the actor from our player, and we then need to cast it to a specific player blueprint. In my case, I'm using the BP_ third person character. Then we want to set the player blueprint, so drag that off, execute, and set the value to the cast. For the tick event, we first need a branch to detect if we have received any shoot ink. We're going to do branch. And for this, we're going to do an OR boolean, which we'll assign the values to in a moment. Just assign that over to the branch. And for the OR values, we'll first do if we're shooting automatic, or we're receiving the automatic input, and the gun is automatic, we'll do shoot. And the same thing for the semi-auto shooting. So let's begin by getting a player to a reference to our player, and we'll then do shoot auto input. Then we'll do end boolean. And for the other value of the end, we want to check is automatic. So if our weapon is automatic, otherwise we do not want to listen to that input. Go ahead and duplicate this over, hook it up to the OR. And for is automatic, we want to do not boolean in this case. So if it's not automatic, and instead of shoot auto input, we want to do shoot semi input. With our if statement finished, we want to go ahead and drag it off from the true. So if we are shooting, we want to execute the shoot function. Then we want to drag off from could shoot. And if we could shoot, what we want to do is set the can shoot variable to be false, and then we're going to apply a delay to it. And after the delay, we're going to set this to be true. Now for the delay time, we're just going to pass our fire rate. Now we should be done, but I forgot one thing over on the shoot function, and that is the sound. So go over here, and the return node just disconnected for a moment. And after this, just drag this off and do play sound 2D. And for the sound, we're going to pass our shoot sound. Drag that there, and then go ahead and drag the return node and connect it. Now we can actually finish the weapon and set everything up with the animations. Alright, let's get to the weapon. In the description of the video, you have a RAR file called weapon assets. In there you will find everything, the models, the animations, textures, everything. Now just to be clear, animations and models for the arms are mine, but the weapon itself is from Dead Ghost Interactive's FPS weapon bundle. Now, before we import that in, let's organize things a little. Let's create a new folder called models, inside of it another one weapons, and then another one for AK. Inside the AK folder, we'll go ahead and import the textures folder first. So go ahead and do that, drag them in, and wait for them to import. Go ahead and import the FBX for AK anims. Once you import it, this will prompt, and over here select the skeletal mesh. So we force it to be a skeletal mesh. Go ahead and click import. You will see an error on the bottom right, but don't worry, this won't affect anything. It's just a matter of how it was exported. Go ahead and close that, and now let's just organize this a little bit. First of all, we'll create a materials folder, and we'll go ahead and drag all the materials into it. We're left with all the mesh assets and the animations. Let's first take a look at the animations and make sure that everything is working. So go ahead and double click on the shoot animation, and yes, everything is working, as you can see. Let's go ahead and close that, and I'm gonna grab the animations and move them out to the game folder to later be organized. Let's go ahead and set up the materials, which it's a little bit tedious, but it's not that big a deal. Go into materials, and if you come from Unity, this is different. So just bear with me. I'm gonna graze over it like just a tiny bit, but you should be good. Right click, create a new material, call it master, and we're going to go into it. Then what we want to do is we want to drag texture. So I'm gonna go into the content drawer, and I'm gonna find the AK textures. Now inside here, I'm gonna grab the albedo, and I'm gonna grab the AK normal. Then right click on those two and do convert to parameter, drag this one over to base, and drag this one over to RGB. There we go. Now I'm just gonna rename this guy to be albedo and this one to be normal. Now this is done, we're good to start configuring our textures. So over here, we want to begin by first going over to AK and selecting AK anims. This way, let's have it open so we can see over here where the actual materials go. So let's go back here, and I'm gonna start by right clicking here and do create material instance, and we're going to select, in this case, let's do fingers. I'm gonna name it MI material instance underscore fingers. Then if we open the instance, we can see that over here we just enable albedo and normal, and then we can find the actual texture. So let's look for fingers, select the albedo, and then let's select the normal for fingers. Make sure to save it. And then on the skeletal mesh, where the fingers default material is, we're going to drag the new material in, and you can see that we have our actual textures. Now, go ahead and do that for every single material, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Alright, I am done setting everything up, and as you can see, everything has its textures. So go ahead and save the skeletal mesh, and you can close this tab now. Now it's time to create the actual AK blueprint, which don't worry, we don't have to make any code at all. It's all very simple. Before we do that, I'm just gonna go ahead and grab these materials and just completely delete them as we no longer need them. Let's go now over to game, and we're gonna create a new folder called animations. We're gonna go inside of it, and we're gonna create two new folders. One's gonna be called montages, and the other one's gonna be called sequences. Let's go ahead and move the animations over to the sequences folder. And then let's go to the montage folder, and we're going to right click, go to animation, and we're going to create a new animation montage. For the skeleton, select AK anims underscore skeleton, and this one I'm going to name it AM underscore AK underscore shoot. Inside of it, we're going to go ahead and drag the actual shoot animation, and we should be good. So once you drag it in here, you can see now that it shoots and it plays the animation, but we need to mess with the blending and blend out. For this, I recommend a value of 0.075 for both of them. Go ahead and save it, and let's now go ahead and create the animation blueprint. So we're gonna go over to game, blueprints, weapons, and over here let's create a new folder called AK. Inside of it, we'll right click, and we're gonna create animation blueprint. Select the AK anim skeleton. Create ABP underscore AK. So inside here, it's actually pretty simple. We're just going to grab the idle loop. Make sure it's the one that says idle and not idle pose. go over here and select loop animation and enable it. Then drag this off and do default slot, and this is where montage will be played. So make sure it's after this. Then drag this over to the result and compile. And you can see we're actually doing the idle animation. So once we play the actual montage, it will do it. Go ahead and close out of it. And then we're going to right click Blueprint class. And this time we're going to go over here to all classes and find BP_FireArm. And we're going to create it as a child of this. We're going to name it BP_AK. Go ahead and open it up. On the AK blueprint, let's quickly configure it. So the first thing is go over here to the top left where it says skeletal mesh, select it, and then go to the right. And for the skeletal mesh asset, we'll assign the AK anims. For the anim class, we'll go ahead and assign ABP_AK. And you can see it's already playing the animation over here. Let's now set up the values. Over for class defaults, if you go over here and look at it, there's one error, and that is that can shoot is set to be false by default. It should be true. So let's fix that really quick, going over to BP FireArm, and we're going to set the can shoot variable to be true by default. And also, just so that we are here on the shoot function, let's set the line trace debug to for duration, just so we can see the actual bullet being shot. Go ahead and compile it. Over on the AK blueprint, let's quickly assign the values. For my values, I decided to go with a fire rate of 0.09 and the range of 500, recoil 0.2 and 0.5. And over here, just assign the AK montage. And for the sound, I did not import it live with you guys, but I did leave it on the folder. So if you have not imported it, just go ahead and import it now. And this should work. So let's go ahead and compile it. One more thing I will do for the sake of it not being too large in the game, I'm going to scale the skeletal mesh down to 0.7. Then let's go over to our third person character blueprint, and over here on the viewport, we're going to go to the bottom left on the content drawer and drag in the BPAK, and we're going to now make it a child of the camera boom. And then let's just align it over with the camera. These are the values I decided to use. Before we test, there is one thing I forgot, and it's regarding the camera and recoil. So go over to your character blueprint, and over here you will see on the camera boom a camera lag option. So let's over here under lag, enable camera rotation lag and set the value to something like 20 so that we're not skipping through it. That way the camera doesn't skip and it smoothly recoils up. As you can see here in the game, we have our weapon playing the idle animation and we can shoot it. It plays both the sound and the animation, and if I toggle the line trace, you can see that the bullet goes exactly where it is. So I hope you found that helpful. If not, I'm sorry, I'm heading out to break my own code now. Bye.